When you have a conflict arise, there are various techniques that you can use to resolve it. What we're going to do in this movie is just review for you some of the different techniques that you can use in order to resolve your conflict. First thing you could do is you can add a resource to a task. How do I do that? Well, you select the task that contains the conflict. So in this case, I'm going to assume that identifying subcategories is the task involved. And I'm going to double click on it. And that opens my task information screen. In order to add another resource, I make sure I'm selecting the Resources tab. I come down to my resource name, select the line below Web Designer, click my drop-down menu, and then pick one of the other available resources for myself that I can get to help that particular individual. So I'm going to say the Marketing Manager is going to plug in as best they can for this particular task, and then add them in by clicking my checkbox. Now, if I assign both of them working 100% to this, then they'll each get it done and help decrease the amount of time that's taking to do that particular task. So this is a really good way to be able to add a resource to your task. And now if I wanted to select a different resource, I could just remove this particular resource and add in the Marketing Manager. And now I've adjusted the task assignment and perhaps removed my conflict. I could also use overtime. So if I wanted to identify overtime, I would open up the resources assigned to a different task. Another thing you can do is you can look at the resources themselves and add overtime options in. And even though this will decrease the amount of time that it's going to take you to work on your project, it might increase your cost because you're going to be paying a higher dollar value for the time that that particular individual works overtime. To refresh our memories of how to add overtime into the project, I'll go to my resource sheet. I'll select my Web Designer, and I can just put in an overtime right here. So if his standard rate is $30 an hour, I will put in $50 an hour as his overtime rate. Now that does not change the fact that he's over-allocated overall, but it does allow me to play with the ability to increase or decrease his work time. Now, that will also help with my allocations and over-allocations. In order to change the work times for that individual, I can open up the Web Designer resource information screen and change their work time by going to the General tab. And in the changing the working time screen, selecting the date where I know that there is a conflict. So I do believe it was on the 12th of April. In my exceptions area, I will say overtime for conflict resolution. I'm going to start it on the 12th. It's going to end on the 12th, and I'm going to say OK. As I say OK, I can then go back to that particular task and make sure that that is one of the resolutions that I have created, and just ensure that I've adjusted the resource allocations correctly. If I go back to my resource allocation view, which is again the first screen, and I take a look at my Web Designer and see what changes I've made to their allocation. And if I go to the April 8th work week, I see that I've cleared up that problem. But I've deferred those jobs to the next week, so I'm just perpetuating that problem. So this is probably not the easiest way for me to work with my resource conflicts. The Project 2007 application gives you the ability to do that completely automatically by using something called resource leveling. And we're going to talk about that in our next movie.